Chairman, I'd like to respond to my Democratic colleagues' concerns about local media and the role that NPR plays in that. There was an article that pointed out that traditional outlets like the New York Times have moved so far to the left that they and other national outlets have lost the trust of most Americans, who now place more trust in state and local media. In response to that, left-wing foundations have made massive investments in nonprofit journalism and related efforts. Most notably, the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation put up $500 million over 5 years in hopes of fundamentally upending the local news marketplace and buying a place in the local news. Now, Mr. Graham, Mr. Irwin, you can respond to this. I think it's pretty evident that content is driven by your revenue sources. Would you agree with that, yes or no?
Yeah, there has been this tendency now in public media, obviously. They'll tell you that they're provided, they're supported by the MacArthur Foundation or something. But private journalism too.
Well, and Mr. Irwin, if you'd like to respond, it's a yes or no, really.
Yes, and that includes tax dollars.
Well, the point that I want to make is that you agree that revenue drives content. Okay, if you're not providing the content, then the money's not going to be there. And we've kind of gotten wrapped around the axle a little bit about taxpayer funding of this, which I think is wrong. Frankly, I think we shouldn't be funding left-wing propaganda. But I do think we need to look at the content and the source of revenue. And if you start looking at, for instance, who funds these organizations, they're the same people who make political contributions to left-wing Democratic candidates. They're also, this is what's really interesting to me, some of these foundations are the same people who are funding the pro-Palestinian demonstrations. I mean, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, for instance, the Rockefeller Brothers Fund. David Rockefeller has been very open about his support of some of these demonstrations and is a major supporter of Democratic candidates. Mike and Nick Pritzker, the Hyatt Hotel family, same thing. You look at Arabella, which is a conglomerate of funding sources of left-wing foundations. William and Flora Hewlett, David and Lucille Packard, the Ford Foundation, Robert Wood Johnson, Gordon Betty Moore Foundation, the MacArthur Foundation. Isn't it interesting that these are the same people who fund NPR? Would you think it would have an impact on content, Mr. Graham?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the socialist critique of the news media used to be that, if Ford's funding the news media, then it must all be pro-big business. Well, a lot of times today in public broadcasting, when you just listen to them saying, the show is brought to you by the Public Welfare Foundation for Transformative Justice. I mean, they do announce, basically, we are giving money to get a certain result. Back under the Obama years, NPR actually took money from a charity called the Plowshares Fund, explicitly to report on the Iran arms, the Iranian arms thing. But they were supporters of giving Iran arms.
These are the same foundations that are funding the radical climate agenda that has caused food prices to skyrocket, household energy costs to skyrocket. They're the same people who advocate open borders. They're the same radical left funding anarchist groups. They're the same individuals behind the foundations who fund Democratic candidates who then advocate for more left-wing radical policies that have created the border crisis, made food unaffordable, and have made our communities less safe. And so my point, gentlemen and my colleagues, is that what we're really talking about here is a major network funding a propaganda machine that supports left-wing policies, that completely ignores conservative points of view, that the same people who are funding this propaganda machine is also funding liberal Democratic candidates, and they're the same people funding these protesters and these anarchist groups. Gentlemen, you're welcome to respond. Mr. Graham, Mr. Irwin.
I would just add that Catherine Marr comes from this world. She was previously the head of the Wikimedia Foundation. She is on the board of Signal, and she's explicitly said the First Amendment is a problem. I know her tweets have become somewhat famous, but she's one of their operatives. And Absolutely, taking over NPR is part of their desire to drive what everyone's able to think and what narratives are allowed in our society.
I just think you have to look at the 990s and you know, look at who's funding this to really understand what's going on here. Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to have this. I think this hearing was justified, and we should have had it a long time ago. And I do, I agree with my Democratic colleagues. I'd be happy to have another hearing and bring the CEO of NPR in here to answer some of these questions. So
And I
I'll go
hope we
back.
will at a time that's more convenient.